Hi everyone, I hope you are doing well. So let's go for this bonus tutorial. We resume where we were stopped. You don't have to follow the first part to export your camera, but it's a very useful trick that I use regularly to create simple masks. So don't hesitate to look at it. Let's go. Okay, so here we are on the final scene, and what we want now is to export our camera from 3ds Max to After Effects. For that I will already change my rendering system because it does not work under V-Ray. I select Skyline. I now open my material editor and I create a standard material. I select all my scene and I apply this material that I pass in 100% black. Okay, perfect. Now I just duplicate this material and I change the color to white. I also apply a self-illumination with the same color to bring out this material. And I can now apply it to my perfume. Perfect. I now remove all my lights because I don't need them. I go to the render setup and I do the same with the render element. And I can now run a perfect render. We only have our white bottle which will serve as a mask. We will now go to export to recover our camera. So I choose the right frame range and I can now save my file. Here, camera. And for the export we will select .rpf. And if I save, we see several options. Remember to check the depth for the file to export the depth information. We can also retrieve other information, but which is not useful for us today. So, okay, and I can render my animation. And as you can see, the render is very fast. It took me 5 minutes to render these 150 frames. Okay, so here we are in After Effects with my compositing. I will not go into depth on the color correction effect because I already talked about that on the Skull Ash tutorial. You can go see if you are interested. So I have my base file with a blue filter. The second is the refraction map, which eliminates the bottom of my bottle. For this, I use a mask. If you want to do the same thing, it's very simple. Just go to this tab and make the mask you want. I then apply the little color correction as well as a glow and an orange tint to color this effect properly. Then the next two layers are just used to add a little contrast and saturation. And I added in the left side a flare with the optical flare plugin, which will add a pretty orange atmosphere. I can obviously increase its intensity. If I go to the option, we can see the flare used, which is a simple sun. We can of course change the color to have the tint that we want. Of course, as for the refraction, I created error mask to limit this effect. I can adjust this mask as I want. Then I just use the smoke atmosphere footage to add a bit of fog style atmosphere. You can see the full footage here. It is then added on the side in screen mode to be very light and of course with a mask. To add even more life to this scene, I also added a footage of particles as you can see here, but I will show you how to create your own particles and configure them later. It will be much more interesting and it adapts to any type of project. And for the last layer, I just added a simple curve to add more luminosity and a sharpen which allows us to have more sharpness in the final rendering. You can see the difference before and after. To create it, just go to Blur and Sharpen and here Sharpen. You can then add the value you want. Perfect. Okay, now we will see how to import the camera that we exported in .rpf, which will allow us to add text or any element in our animation. For that, it's very simple. I will remove this camera, import my RPF file, and slip them into my composition. We can see here the black and white masks that we created earlier. And for the example, I create a new adjustment layer with maybe a curve effect to change the tint, luminosity, maybe like this. Just place my mask on top and change the mode to Lumamate, which will allow us to make an automatic mask with the black and white texture. It's really cool. You can see the difference here. I can of course apply the effects that I want. Maybe try a black and white effect. Very nice. This is really another quick and easy way to export mask as well. Okay, if I only keep my camera RPF layer, we can see here the movement of the animation, and we will now extract our camera file. For that, it's very simple. Right click on the camera, keyframe assistant, and RPF camera import. And we can see that it has generated a camera here. If I click on U on my keyboard, I can see all the keys of this camera with the axis of position and rotation. I will now create a text to test that our camera is good. We can see that for the moment it doesn't work, because we have to pass this layer in 3D mode. So I click on the cube here to activate 3D. We can zoom out to see that our text has gone very far. To fix this, we will change the position coordinate to 0, 0, 0. We can see now that the text is much too big, so we will reduce its scale. Like that, it's not bad, I think, and I can now place it on the right of our bottle. Perfect. If I go back to 2ds Max, we can see that our bottle is not exactly in the center of our scene, but a little forward. So I will remember this information for After Effects. So I go back in After Effects, and in the Position tab, I will change the value of Z to -25, I think. I'm adjusting my text a bit. And we can launch a preview. And it's look really good to me. Of course, the text is a little big and therefore it interferes with the plant, but we can export a plant mask to better integrate the text. You have here the principle to export a camera from 2ds Max and integrate it with element in After Effects. We will now see how to create a particle system in After Effects from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to create a new solid, and in Effect, I'm going to select Trapcode Particular. I'm just going to keep this layer to easily work on it, and we see that nothing appears as for the text. I will therefore switch to emitter and set the position to 0, 0, 0. And now we can see the particles. I will just modify the value in Z to move everything back, like that. You can see in the emitter type that you can have different sources of emission, but for this tutorial we will use box. We can obviously modify the size of the box manually. I think it will be not bad like that. We can also increase the number of particles. We can see here the animation. There is another parameter on which we can play here, like the velocity. If I set it to 0, we can see that there is no more movement in the velocity of the particles. I'm going to put a value of 50 and increase the random velocity a little bit. I think it will be better like this. Okay, now we will see the particle tab. We can reduce the size, also play on the randomness. Same for opacity to add variation. Here we have opacity over life and size over life, which will allow us to control these properties during the life of each particle. We have here several presets, but personally I most often use this one, which starts from 0 to quickly go up to 100 and slowly return to 0. It gives very good result in my opinion. And here we can see in the preview that we start to have something very interesting and organic. We can obviously change the color, but I will stay in white for the moment. We don't need the shading tab for this effect. We will go directly to physics. We can of course play on gravity. In the R tab we can apply wind force by playing on the X, Y and Z axis. A very interesting property is to play on the turbulence field. I really like to increase the affect position to add a lot of turbulence and add a fairly low scale, like maybe a value of 3, to have something organic. And if I play the animation, you can really see that the particle animation is very smooth and lively. It's perfect. What we can also do is to go to camera properties to activate the depth of field. We can see here that is already activated and we see the difference. We can of course play on the blur level. Also on the aperture to reduce the depth of field and increase the blur. It's up to you to see what you prefer. We can see that the result is very interesting. I'm going to add a glow to make my particles a little more visible. And here we see a very nice bokeh. I'm going to play the animation to see how it looks. Really beautiful. What I'm going to do now is move the position of my emitter to have particles coming from the right side of the screen. Like this. We see that the particle no longer appear. So I'm going to go to physics and increase the Y in the x-axis. Now maybe I can increase life and life random. And if I play, we can see a beautiful particle animation that's come from the right and goes to the left. It's perfect. I can now enable motion blur by clicking here and here. I'm going to change the color of my particles to something more like a fiber particle. Perfect. I will now reactivate all my layers to see the final result. I change the blending mode to add, and maybe I will reduce the number of particles a little bit. I feel like there are too many. I can now just duplicate with Ctrl D my particular layer. Maybe it tries to really bring out the particles. And now if I read the final version, we can see that we have a really cool animation with a nice particle movement. It's really cool and beautiful. Okay, so you have here the basics of how to create these particles. All you have to do now is to configure them to create the movement you want. Okay guys, it's over for this bonus tutorial. I hope you've learned a lot of things, and of course see you soon for new content. Bye!